Tell me if this sounds familiar. You read a news story about someone who ruined lives, a scammer, an abuser, a corrupt official, a violent criminal, and your first thought is automatic. How could someone be that evil? You imagine them knowing they're bad, knowing they're cruel, knowing they're hurting people. But here's the uncomfortable truth. Almost no one wakes up in the morning thinking, "Today I'm going to be the villain." In fact, most evil people think they're right. Some think they're necessary. Some think they're victims. Some think they're the good guys in a world that just doesn't understand them. And that's what makes this terrifying, because evil doesn't usually come from people who love doing harm. It comes from people who don't see themselves as harmful at all. This video isn't about monsters. It's about something much harder to look at. It's about how ordinary human psychology creates extraordinary harm. And by the end of this video, you might realize something unsettling. The line between good people and evil people isn't where you think it is. Let's start with the most important idea you need to understand. Evil rarely feels evil from the inside. From the inside, it feels justified. Human beings are meaning-making machines. We have to see ourselves as coherent, moral, reasonable. Our brains are wired to protect our self-image at all costs. This is called moral self-concept. You don't just want to survive. You want to believe you're a good person. And when your actions clash with that belief, your brain doesn't say, "Wow, I guess I'm evil now." It says, "Here's why this was necessary." This is where everything starts. Let's talk about rationalization. Rationalization is the psychological process of creating explanations that make our actions feel justified, even when they cause harm. And the scary part, it happens automatically. The brain doesn't wait for permission. It fills in the story after the behavior. A person lies. The brain says, "They deserve the truth less than I deserve protection." A person cheats. The brain says, "You were neglected. You were lonely. Anyone would have done the same." A person exploits others. The brain says, "This is just how the world works. If I didn't do it, someone else would." Notice something? The brain never says, "I chose to be cruel." It says, "I was forced. I was justified. I had no choice." And once a story like that takes hold, evil becomes invisible to the person committing it. Now let's take this deeper, because rationalization alone doesn't explain mass harm. It doesn't explain atrocities, or systemic abuse, or people who destroy lives without remorse. For that, we need to talk about moral disengagement. Moral disengagement is the process by which people disconnect their actions from their moral standards. In simple terms, it's how you hurt people without feeling like you're hurting people. And there are several ways the mind does this. The first is dehumanization. This one is ancient. When you stop seeing someone as fully human, your empathy shuts down. They become idiots, animals, parasites, enemies, less than. Once someone is reduced to a label, cruelty stops feeling cruel. Because in your mind, you're no longer hurting a person, you're dealing with a problem. This is why some of the worst evils in history were committed by people who believed they were doing society a favor. They weren't thinking, "I am harming humans." They were thinking, "I am removing threats." And here's the disturbing part. Dehumanization doesn't require hatred. Sometimes it's cold, bureaucratic, efficient, a checkbox, a policy, a number on a screen. Which brings us to the next mechanism, diffusion of responsibility. This is how people do evil while feeling clean. When responsibility is spread across a system, no one feels personally accountable. It wasn't me. It was the rules. It was my job. It was the company. It was orders. Each individual action feels small, but together, they create devastation. And because no single person feels fully responsible, no one feels evil. Now let's talk about something even more unsettling. Victimhood. Many evil people don't see themselves as villains. They see themselves as victims who are finally fighting back. This is where the psychology becomes extremely dangerous. Because when someone believes they are wronged, almost anything becomes justifiable. They started it. I'm just responding. They pushed me. They made me this way. Pain becomes permission. Suffering becomes a license to harm. And here's the twist. Sometimes they were hurt, abuse, but instead of processing that pain, they weaponize it, they externalize it, they pass it forward. This is how trauma turns into tyranny. And from the inside, it doesn't feel like cruelty. It feels like justice. Now let's address something uncomfortable. Intent doesn't define evil, impact does. And most evil people focus obsessively on their intent. I didn't mean to hurt anyone. I was trying to help. My heart was in the right place. But harm doesn't care about intentions. And focusing on intent allows people to ignore consequences. This is especially common in people with high moral certainty. These are individuals who believe they are unquestionably right. And when you believe you are morally correct, anyone who disagrees becomes immoral. Anyone who resists becomes dangerous. Anyone who suffers becomes collateral. This is why the most dangerous people aren't always sadistic. They're convinced. Now let's zoom out even further. Because evil isn't just individual. It's cultural, social, learned. Human beings are tribal by nature. We divide the world into us and them instinctively. And once that line is drawn, moral standards shift. Things that would feel unthinkable toward us suddenly feel acceptable toward them. This is called moral relativism within groups. Your values don't disappear, they just stop applying universally. And once that happens, good people can do terrible things without ever feeling like bad people. Here's something that should stop you cold. Most people who commit great harm are psychologically normal. Not insane, not monsters, not broken beyond recognition. They love their families, they laugh, they sleep at night. They just learn to turn empathy off selectively. And now, the hardest part of this video, the part most people don't want to hear. Evil doesn't begin with violence. It begins with small self-justifications, tiny moral compromises, little lies we tell ourselves, moments where we choose comfort over conscience, silence over intervention, convenience over integrity. No one jumps straight to atrocity. They slide gradually, quietly, with reasons. And this is why evil people don't think they're evil. Because by the time the harm is visible, the story has already been rewritten. They're not the villain, they're the hero of their own narrative, the survivor, the realist, the necessary evil in an unfair world. So what actually separates good from evil? Here's the answer no one likes. The ability to question your own righteousness. That's it. Not intelligence, not education, not empathy alone, but humility. The willingness to ask, what if I'm wrong? What if my justification is a lie? What if my pain doesn't excuse my behavior? Evil thrives where self-reflection dies, where certainty replaces curiosity, where moral discomfort is avoided instead of examined. And here's the final truth. If you think evil is something other people do, you're already vulnerable to it. Because the moment you believe you're incapable of harm, your mind will stop checking itself. The most dangerous phrase in human psychology is "I would never." So maybe the real lesson isn't about spotting evil people. Maybe it's about spotting the moments where we start excusing ourselves, the moments where we stop seeing others as fully human, the moments where we trade understanding for certainty. Because evil doesn't announce itself. It whispers, and it always sounds reasonable. If this video made you uncomfortable, good. That discomfort is awareness, and awareness is the first thing evil loses. If you want more psychology videos like this, videos that don't just explain behavior, but expose the machinery behind it, subscribe. Because understanding the mind isn't about feeling superior, it's about staying honest, especially with yourself.